Welcome everyone! In today's video, we are diving into one of photography's most perplexing topics, the crop factor, and uncovering how it impacts your photos and videos. To dive deeper into this subject, I will be conducting some experiments with two different lenses on my Sony full-frame A7IV. The first lens is the Sigma18-50mm f2.8, specifically designed for full-frame cameras. And the second lens is the Sigma18-50mm f2.8, which is originally intended for APS-C cameras. When using the APS-C lens, I will activate the Super Certified Crop mode on the camera to simulate how it performs on an APS-C camera body. We will be looking at their general image quality, low light performance, background separation, and how they perform when shooting videos. First, let's take a look at image quality, especially the bokeh in the background. Here I have some photos taken with the same aperture at different focal lengths. I didn't use a tripod, but I tried my best to stay at the same distance every time. In some of the photos, you can't see much difference, but I think I can safely say that generally the photos taken with the Sigma 28-70mm lens have more obvious background separation than those taken with the APS-C counterpart. For a better visual understanding, here is another example, a dog portrait. Here I want to maximize the bokeh size, so I'm zooming in as far as possible on both lenses and shooting wide open at f2.8. 50mm APS-C is equivalent to 75mm full frame, so theoretically it should be more blurry in the background. But you can see in this comparison, apparently the full-frame lens at 70mm produces more bokeh in the background. How about low light performance? Well, you can see at ISO 3200, the image taken with the full-frame lens has less noise than when taken with an APS-C lens, and it is even more obvious at ISO 6400. Another thing worth considering is resolution. When you put an APS-C lens on a full-frame camera, you lose a lot of pixels. In this example, on my Sony A7IV, it is originally a 33-megapixel camera, and it produces full-frame JPEG images that are 7,008 pixels by 4,672 pixels. But when you use APS-C mode, it gives you only 4,608 by 3,072 pixels. It means nothing if you're only viewing the images on the internet or on social media, but not ideal for large printout. And I think it is kind of a waste to own such an expensive camera and only to use APS-C mode. Let's also look at video performance. It's actually very similar to the results in the last part. You can see the videos taken with a full-frame lens have more obvious background separation, and in low-light scenarios, they also have less noise. But here is something that surprised me. I've always assumed that as long as the videos are taken with the same camera with the same codec, in this case it's 10-bit 422, then they will have the same dynamic range. But it seems I was wrong. When you do crazy color grading, you can see apparently the video shot with the full-frame lens has better dynamic range and therefore more smooth color transition. The videos you just saw were shot at 24 frames per second. If you are a Sony A7IV user, you might already know that when you shoot 4K 60 frames per second, it only supports crop mode, which means your video is going to be cropped anyway, no matter what kind of lens you use. But surprisingly, when I use a full-frame lens shooting 4K 60p, it looks as if it crops in even more than when I use an APS-C lens. The perspective looks more zoomed in, and again, the background bokeh is more obvious. What about dynamic range in 4K 60p? Let's do another crazy color grading. Well, basically, I think they look very similar. I changed the color of the leaves from green to orange, and you can see a little bit more noise on both clips. So far, according to our experiments, when you put an APS-C lens on a full-frame camera body, for photography you lose resolution, you get less bokeh, you get more noise in low light, and for video, again, you get less bokeh, more noise, less dynamic range, and only when you shoot 4K 60p, when they are both in cropped mode, can you get more similar results in terms of color grading, but still less background blur in APS-C. So now you might be wondering, what are the advantages of putting an APS-C lens on a full-frame camera? First of all, if you are originally a Sony APS-C user, now upgrading to a full-frame system, you can still keep all your APS-C lenses and put them on your full-frame camera. It is one of the biggest benefits for Sony users. Basically, you have one full-frame camera, but you are able to use both systems, so you can switch and swap. Another thing is that most APS-C lenses are smaller and less expensive than full-frame lenses. So as long as you are in good lighting condition, more often than not, it's still going to be enough. And even more so when you are shooting in 4K 60p, because you have very similar dynamic range for color grading. Moreover, most full-frame cameras have better stabilization than APS-C cameras, so you can take steadier photos and videos. Now, if you are considering these two specific lenses, here are some factors you should definitely keep in mind. The photos taken with the 18-50mm lens have more vignetting when shooting wide open, but as you stop down, it becomes less obvious. I think this is probably only specific to this lens, not because of the full-frame and APS-C difference. Because theoretically, when you use crop mode, you will be cropping some of the vignetting and only be using the sharpest part of the image at the center. Another thing I tested is minimum focus distance. This is also not related to full-frame and APS-C system. The Sigma 18-50mm lens has an amazingly short minimum focus distance. Sometimes I think it can act as a macro lens. You can see the front of the lens is almost touching the object. On the other hand, the full-frame 28-70mm lens does not have the same good performance in terms of minimum focus distance. When you get too close, you will see the focus hunting continuously. Alright, I hope you find this video helpful. No matter you want to know more about putting an APS-C lens on a full-frame body, or maybe you are choosing between these two lenses for your full-frame camera. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Do you have any experience of putting an APS-C lens on a full-frame camera? And if you do, how do you think about the performance? Thanks for watching. I will see you next time.